They said it was just a wedding, a simple ceremony to unite two families. But for me, it felt like a prison sentence delivered with flowers, lace, and forced smiles. My parents were so proud. Until I stopped. The vows pulled out a letter and told the truth in front of everyone. That day, I didn't just walk away from the altar. I walked away from years of silence, obedience, and sacrifice. And I made sure the world was watching. Because if they wanted a show, I was going to give them one they'd never forget. My name is Ariana, and I was 23 years old when I realized that my life wasn't really mine. On the outside, everything looked perfect. I grew up in a polished two-story house in the suburbs, the kind with trimmed hedges and neighbors who waved too much. My mother, Clara, was the kind of woman who hosted brunches with perfectly folded napkins and Pinterest-worthy charcuterie boards. My father, Gregory, ran a mid-sized accounting firm and believed in respectability more than he believed in emotions. Ever since I was a kid, I was told two things: be obedient and don't embarrass the family. That was the golden rule in our house. It was printed on invisible wallpaper, sewn into the seams of my school uniforms, and baked into every dinner conversation. When I got good grades, my mother would smile, not because she was proud, but because it made her look like a successful parent. When I didn't get invited to a party, she'd say, "That's fine, dear. Girls with reputations don't get husbands." Yeah, that was the kind of household I lived in. I was never encouraged to dream for myself. Any sign of rebellion, dyed hair, a pierced nose, even staying out 5 minutes past curfew was a disgrace. So I learned to stay quiet. I did what I was told. I got into a good college, graduated with a degree in marketing, and moved back home like a good daughter. But deep down, I was suffocating. I didn't know how to say it out loud yet, but I craved freedom in a way that felt like hunger. My parents had always had this weird obsession with appearances, especially my mother. She cared about the family image more than our actual happiness. And the crown jewel of that image, the Delgados. The Delgados were my parents' longtime friends, especially Susan Delgado, my mother's sister in spirit. That woman was a walking designer label. Loud, opinionated, and the self-declared queen of the neighborhood's social circle. She had one son, Lucas Delgado. He was tall, mildly attractive, in a spreadsheet kind of way, and had the personality of dry toast. Lucas and I had known each other since we were kids. We weren't close. He mostly ignored me, and I was fine with that. He always struck me as cold, too calculating for someone his age. He followed rules like they were commandments, and looked down on anyone who didn't. Basically, he was my mother's dream son. So when she came into my room one night, smiling like she'd won the lottery, I knew something was wrong. "I have wonderful news," she said, clasping her hands. "The Delgados have proposed a match between you and Lucas." I blinked, thinking I misheard. "A what?" "A marriage, sweetie. A real partnership. Lucas has a stable job, comes from a good family, and it would bring our two households even closer." I laughed. I actually laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. "I'm not marrying Lucas' mom." Her face turned stone cold. "Ariana, this isn't just about you. This is about our family, our legacy. You'd be uniting two powerful names in our community. It's an honor." I felt like I was in some twisted Jane Austen novel, but without the romance or choice. "I don't love him. I don't even like him, I said, my voice rising. You'll learn to love him. Respect grows in a marriage, she replied, like she was quoting from some outdated women's manual. I went to my father for backup, hoping for some rationality, but all he said was, "It's a strategic match. You'll be taken care of." I wasn't a person to them. I was an asset, a bargaining chip, something to be traded for reputation points. I tried everything, pleading, crying, even threatening to move out. But they cut me off financially the moment I pushed back. If you want to act like a disobedient child, my mother said, then you can survive like one. They took my car keys, canceled my credit cards, and reminded me that my college loans were still under their name. I was trapped. The walls of my childhood home suddenly felt like a gilded cage. I started sleeping with headphones and blasting music, just to drown out the voice in my head that kept whispering, "This is your life now." I'd wake up every morning hoping it was all a nightmare, but the wedding date was set. Invitations were sent. Dresses were ordered. The more I protested, the more they doubled down. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about their image. Calling off the wedding would be a scandal, a betrayal, something that would make Susan Delgado clutch her pearls and whisper behind napkin-covered lips at brunch. They didn't care that I was breaking inside. They only cared about keeping face. And what terrified me most was that they truly believed they were doing the right thing. My mom actually said sometimes daughters must sacrifice for their families. That's what love looks like, but I knew the truth. That wasn't love. That was control, dressed up in tradition. And I had to find a way out before I walked down an aisle that felt more like a guillotine than a promise. I tried to breathe through it. I told myself I could make it work just long enough to figure out an escape plan. But every time I saw Lucas's name on a wedding checklist or heard my mom talking about his favorite cake flavors, my stomach turned. Lucas didn't even call to check in or ask how I felt about the wedding. He didn't seem to care. To him, it was a done deal. A business merger sealed with flowers and a ring. One afternoon, I met with him at a cafe to just try to find some common ground. Maybe if I could talk to him, reason with him, he'd understand that I wasn't ready, that I didn't want this. But when I brought it up, he just sipped his espresso and shrugged. "It's not that big a deal, Ariana. Our families want it. It's convenient. You'll adjust." "Adjust," I repeated, stunned. "This isn't a new mattress. It's my life." He looked bored. "You're overthinking it. You've lived a comfortable life. This will keep it that way." And that was the moment it hit me. Lucas didn't want a wife. He wanted an accessory, someone who fit the role, smiled at the right times, and didn't make noise. He wanted obedience, not partnership. When I told my mother what he said, hoping naively that she'd be outraged, she gave me that familiar, infuriating look. "Ariana, you've always been dramatic. Lucas is a good man. He'll provide stability. And quite frankly, you're not in a position to be picky." "Not in a position," I repeated, my voice cracking. She folded a towel with unnecessary precision. "You're 23. You live under our roof. You have no savings. You majored in marketing, for God's sake. Do you really think you can survive on your own?" I didn't answer. But in that silence, something shifted inside me. She wasn't just doubting me, she was counting on my fear. She believed I was too weak, too dependent too, groomed to ever leave. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, the wedding dress hanging in the corner, like a ghost, waiting to possess me. It was beautiful. Lace sleeves, pearl buttons, the whole fairy tale fantasy. Except it wasn't mine. None of it was. In the weeks that followed, the pressure only grew. My mom scheduled fittings tastings and spa days like we were planning a royal gala. I showed up because I had no choice, but inside I was crumbling. Every smile I gave felt like a mask I couldn't peel off. I started having panic attacks. In the bathroom, in bed, once in the middle of picking out floral arrangements. I excused myself, locked the stall door, and cried into a handful of paper towels while a stranger on the other side asked if I was okay. I wasn't. The worst part was how alone I felt. None of my friends really knew what was going on. My parents had painted the wedding as a love story, and I didn't dare speak up yet. I felt ashamed, like my silence made me complicit. One evening, my aunt, my dad's sister, came to visit. She was the black sheep of the family, the only one who ever left town and did something bold. She never married, never settled. She wore chunky jewelry and called things like she saw them. When we sat alone in the kitchen, she looked me over and said, "You look pale, like someone's dragging you toward a cliff." I didn't say anything. I just stared at my tea. "Let me guess," she said. "This wedding's not your idea." I looked up startled. "I knew it," she nodded. "I can see it in your face. You look like your mother did when she married your father." That caught me off guard. "What?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Clara didn't marry for love either. She married because it looked good on paper. And now she wants the same for you. Misery loves company. That night I couldn't sleep. Her words rattled around in my chest like loose change. I started thinking about my mother, not as a villain, but as someone who'd been broken, too trapped in the same pattern she was now forcing on me. But I wasn't going to be the next link in that chain. Still, the fear was real. Every time I thought about leaving, I remembered what I'd lose: my home, my support, my family. I wasn't ready yet, but I was getting closer. I started journaling everything, every conversation, every insult masked as concern. Every moment, I felt invisible. I needed evidence, not just for others, but for me. Proof that this wasn't all in my head. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was a lavish, ridiculous affair at a country club with linen napkins and fake smiles. I wore a dress my mother picked. Lucas gave a toast, thanking our beautiful families for this perfect union. I barely tasted my food. When I slipped away to the restroom, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. And that's when I knew I couldn't go through with it. Not just because I didn't want to, but because if I did, I'd be erasing myself, and I refused to disappear. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, I stared at the white folder on my desk labeled Timeline of Events. It was color-coded, printed on thick, glossy paper, and detailed down to the minute. There it was, in black and white, my life scheduled for sacrifice. My hands were shaking. My palms were sweaty. I felt like I was walking into my own funeral. That week, I barely spoke to anyone outside of forced conversations. Every word my mom said to me was through the lens of perfection. Smile more. Post something cute with Lucas, your posture, Ariana shoulders back. It was like I was her show pony being prepped for auction. Lucas was no better. He didn't ask how I was holding up. He didn't notice that my eyes were always red from crying. He just sent photos of wedding suits and said things like, "Our families are going to look so powerful together." It made me sick. One night, I took a walk around the block just to clear my head. I ended up at the park where I used to go as a kid. The same swings were still there, rusty chains and all. I sat down and let myself feel it. The crushing weight of being trapped. The fear of disappointing my parents. The shame of not being grateful for everything they'd done for me. And that's when I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, swinging wildly beside me, giggling as her father pushed her higher. She looked so free, and in that moment, I realized I hadn't felt that kind of freedom in years. I was raised to obey, to impress, to please. I wasn't raised to choose. When I got home that night, I pulled out a notebook and started writing everything down, not just facts, but feelings, memories, moments I wanted to remember in case I forgot myself. One page read, "I'm not sad. I'm angry. I'm angry that love is treated like a transaction. I'm angry that no one asked what I wanted. I'm angry that I believed I couldn't leave." Then came the final fitting. It was supposed to be magical, like something out of a bridal movie montage. But I stood there, stiff as a mannequin, while the seamstress adjusted the dress around me, and my mom beamed with pride. "You look like a princess," she whispered, tears in her eyes. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not a princess. A prisoner. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to run away in secret. I wasn't going to sneak out like a scared girl. No. If they wanted a performance, I'd give them one. A real one. A true one. So I started planning. First, I contacted my friend Jenna. We hadn't talked much lately. My mother didn't like her independent attitude, but I knew she was someone I could trust. I told her everything. She didn't judge. She didn't tell me to suck it up. She said 6 words I didn't know I needed. "What do you want to do?" We spent the next few nights organizing a quiet rebellion. I didn't want to ruin everything just for the sake of vengeance. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted people to see what happened when girls like me were silenced. That's when Jenna came up with the idea, live stream it. If you're going to walk out, let the world see you do it. At first, I was terrified. What would people think? What would my family do? But then I thought about that little girl at the park, the joy in her eyes, the wind in her hair, and I realized I wanted to show her and every girl like her that we could say no. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I had written something, my own vows, in a way, not to Lucas, not to my family, but to myself. A letter I would read at the altar instead of pledging myself to a man I didn't choose. Jenna would handle the tech. She'd stream it to my private social account, where only my close friends followed me. If it went viral, fine. If it didn't, that was okay too. This wasn't about fame. It was about truth. The morning of the wedding, everything looked perfect. The venue was stunning. The flowers were arranged in elegant towers. The guests arrived in designer dresses and sleek suits. My mother hovered around me like a director, making sure every detail aligned with her dream. "Remember to smile," she hissed as she adjusted my veil. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. The ceremony started right on time. My father walked me down the aisle, his arm tight around mine, like he was delivering a package. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear the music. I saw Lucas at the altar, smug and self-assured, like he was accepting an award. I felt nothing. And then I saw Jenna in the back row, holding her phone, giving me the smallest nod. It was time. The officiant began speaking. I heard words like union honor and forever, and my skin crawled. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and pulled the letter from my bouquet. My name is Ariana. I began, voice trembling but loud. And before I go through with this wedding, I need to tell the truth. Gasps, murmurs. My mother's smile froze. I did not choose this marriage. I was told I would be cut off from my family if I didn't comply. I was told I was lucky, that this would keep our reputation. But I'm not property. I'm not a trophy. I'm a person. The room fell silent. I've been treated like a burden for wanting to live on my own terms. But today, I'm choosing to stop the cycle. I will not say vows that don't come from love. I will not build a life based on fear. My voice grew stronger. So I'm leaving. Not because I'm selfish, but because I finally understand that I'm worthy of choice. My mother stood up, face pale with horror. Ariana, sit down. Stop this. But I didn't stop. I turned, walked slowly down the aisle, past shocked relatives and frozen friends. Jenna followed discreetly behind, camera still rolling. My father stood frozen. Lucas looked like someone had just punched him in the gut. I walked out the front door and into the sunlight. The video, as planned, ended with me stepping into Jenna's car and closing the door. We didn't go far, just a quiet hotel across town. But that night, everything changed. The video spread like wildfire. At first, just our circle, then their circle, then strangers. By the next morning, it had over 3 million views. I woke up to hundreds of messages, some from girls saying, I wish I had done this. Some from mothers saying, I want this for my daughter. Some from people I didn't know. Just writing thank you. But not all of it was support. My parents were furious. My mom left me voicemails ranging from weeping to screaming. You've humiliated us. You'll regret this for the rest of your life. But I didn't. I felt light, like someone had removed a 200-pound weight from my chest. Lucas, to his credit, didn't say much. He sent one message. You made your point. Good luck. I didn't reply. That week, I stayed offline except to read the kind messages. I cried more than I ever had, not from sadness, but from release. The pain I'd carried for years was unraveling thread by thread. And then something unexpected happened. A nonprofit reached out to me, an organization focused on empowering young women to resist forced marriages and reclaim autonomy. They'd seen the video. They wanted me to speak at a college event. I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't my thing. But then I thought again about the message I wanted to send. So I said yes. Standing on that stage weeks later in front of hundreds of college students, I told my story not as a victim, but as someone who found the courage to rewrite her ending. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a disappointment. I felt like me. The week after the wedding that wasn't, I kept thinking, was it enough? Sure, I walked away. Sure, I told my truth. But my parents were still trying to spin the story. They told extended family I was having a breakdown, that I had been radicalized by bad influences. I even heard rumors that Lucas's family had considered suing me for emotional distress. It wasn't enough to walk away. I needed to make sure they couldn't bury what happened. I wasn't looking for vengeance in the dramatic destroy your enemies sense. I wanted clarity, justice, the truth in daylight where no one could deny it. Jenna and I started working together quietly. She helped me reach out to a podcast host. She knew a woman who specialized in family coercion, forced marriage, and the invisible pressure that so many daughters face. Her platform was small, but growing, and her followers were fiercely supportive. We recorded an hour-long interview. I told everything: how my parents had emotionally blackmailed me, the silent threat of disownment, the way they praised obedience as if it were a virtue. I read pieces of my letter again. I even talked about the reputation they were trying so desperately to protect and how suffocating it was to be raised as someone's future bargaining chip. The episode aired 3 days later. By the end of the week, it had become her most downloaded episode ever. Suddenly, I was no longer just a girl who walked out of her wedding. I was the face of a conversation people were afraid to have. Women messaged me with stories about being forced to marry cousins, family friends, even complete strangers, all in the name of tradition or status. I realized this wasn't just my battle, it was ours. But the real twist came when I received an email from someone unexpected: Lucas's ex-girlfriend. I hadn't even known he dated anyone seriously before. Her name was Julia, and the subject line of her message read, "I think you need to know this." Inside was a long, thoughtful note. She told me she had been with Lucas for over a year, right before our parents arranged our engagement. She thought they were headed toward marriage until one day he just ghosted her. No closure, no explanation, just vanished. I found out through his cousin that he was being set up with someone else, she wrote. He said it was a family deal he couldn't say no to, that it would be good for business. He called it just politics. My stomach turned. But Julia didn't stop there. Attached to her email were screenshots, texts between her and Lucas from the weeks before our engagement. In them, Lucas bragged about how his family was finally sealing the deal and that he was trading up. He used the words, "Ariana's family has more connections. She's an upgrade." Reading that hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't loved Lucas, not even close, but I had still felt like a person being auctioned. Now, I saw I'd been evaluated too. I forwarded the screenshots to Jenna. "I think we need to post this," I said. She hesitated. "You sure? This changes the game. It's going to humiliate him and your parents." "I'm not doing it for revenge," I said. "I'm doing it because I want girls like me to see the full picture. The system, the manipulation, all of it. I want them to know they're not crazy." We created a second video this time, not a live stream, but a structured, well-edited video essay. We included the original wedding footage snippets from the podcast and Julia's texts with her permission. I narrated the story again this time, less emotional, more focused. Calm, clear, controlled. We titled it, "I Was the Upgrade Bride Until I Said No." It hit 1 million views in 5 days. News outlets began picking it up. Some praised my bravery. Some questioned whether I had overreacted. But the attention worked in my favor. My parents couldn't spin the narrative anymore. They stopped calling. Eventually, I heard through my cousin that they'd left town for a while to avoid the embarrassment. My mother apparently was devastated that people at her church were whispering behind her back. Her perfect image had cracked. Lucas. He went completely silent. Deleted his social media. His family's business page disabled comments after being flooded with angry messages about commodifying women. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I felt resolved. This wasn't about destroying them. It was about removing their power over me. And the final piece of karma came in the form of an invitation, this time not from my family, or a man, or anyone trying to use me. It was from the nonprofit I'd spoken for earlier. They wanted to partner with me on a campaign, My Choice, My Voice. The goal was to educate young women about emotional coercion, how it differs from healthy family guidance, and how to recognize the signs of forced compliance. We created toolkits. We launched social media challenges. We even held workshops in small towns and schools where arranged marriage culture was still taboo to question. In one session, a girl no older than 16 stood up, voice trembling, and said, "I didn't know I was allowed to say no." That's when I realized this was my wedding, not to a man, but to my voice, to my freedom, to a life I actually chose. 6 months after I walked out of my own wedding, I stood on a different kind of stage, this time in a community center packed with young women, teachers, and parents. I wasn't in a white dress. No one was forcing me to smile. I held a microphone, not a bouquet. And I wasn't walking toward a groom. I was walking toward myself. That day I shared my story, not with shame, but with pride. I looked out at dozens of faces, some nodding, some crying, and I realized just how far this journey had taken me, from a silenced daughter to a woman with a voice, from a pawn to a person. After the event, a teenage girl came up to me. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking just a little. "My mom said I have to marry someone this summer," she whispered. "But now, I think maybe I don't." That was it. That was everything. It wasn't about viral videos or views or proving my parents wrong. It was about permission, giving someone else the strength to ask, what if I deserve more? My parents and I still aren't speaking, and maybe we never will. But I've made peace with that. I've learned that silence sometimes is just another kind of freedom. The organization I work with now helps girls all over the country find safe spaces to speak up, say no, and build lives they actually want. And every time I hear one of them say, "This is my choice," I remember the moment I walked down that aisle, not toward a man, but toward the exit, toward a life I got to build for myself. Because I am not someone's sacrifice. I am not someone's reputation. I am mine.